Welcome superstars. In this video, I'm going to talk about the problem with being results focused. Now, I know it sounds counterintuitive that in business, you absolutely want and need to be results focused. And to some degree, that's true. But what I'm going to share with you in this video is a perspective around how being results or outcome focused can actually get in the way of having bigger results. Let me start with a quick story. I was working with a client and we hopped on a call. This was, we've been coaching together for a few months and this client was working on filling his event. Now, the event was structured such that he had colleagues, he had speakers at the event that were supposed to be promoting the event, helping him fill the event. He was also doing Facebook ads. And we got on the call and he was really upset. He was upset because his event wasn't filling up the way he wanted it to. He wasn't getting the outcomes that he wanted. The speakers weren't sending out their emails, the Facebook ads weren't working very well. And as we started digging into the problem, I started asking some really good questions. For example, I asked, had he been personally reaching out to any prospects himself? And he said no. I said, well, have you reached out to your speaker colleagues that are supposed to be promoting the event and found out how many outreaches they have done? No, he hadn't. Have you checked in to see if they're sending their emails? Nope, haven't been doing that either. Had he called his panelists to check in periodically? No. So what I discovered is that while he was focused on these outcomes and the number of people that had registered for the event, he wasn't focusing on the activities that I knew and he knew would actually generate those results. So we came up with a new approach. We identified certain activities that we felt reasonably certain would drive traffic to his event. And then we created a KPIs spreadsheet. And that spreadsheet tracked each of these activities. Over the next few weeks, every week we would check in on the activities. Rather than focusing on the outcomes, how many people are registered for your event? How many calls did you make this week? How many of your sponsor partners did you talk to? How many of your panelists did you talk to? How many Facebook ads did you run? How many clicks did you get? So we started focusing instead on the means to the end rather than the end itself. Well, his event ended up exceeding his expectations. He was able to fill the event because instead of focusing only on the outcomes and what he wasn't getting, he focused on what he could do and what he could control. So the lesson that I learned from this experience was focus on the activities versus the outcomes. Now, we want to make sure the activities are tied to outcomes, that it makes sense. Right? We don't want to have two completely disjointed activities that have nothing to do with the outcomes. But once we've identified the activities and we identify target numbers of activities and we start to track the activities with some sort of accountability, generally speaking, we're going to see the outcomes follow. So what are the activities I'm talking about? Activities are the regular actions that you take on a consistent basis. Now, they might be monthly activities, but more often I like to look at activities weekly and daily. That way you stay on top of them. When you do something monthly, it's very easy to fall off the wagon. But when you're being held to account for something daily and weekly, it's a lot easier to stay on top of it. By the way, if you're liking this video, and before I get into the rest of the video on how to create activities and that create outcomes, I invite you to like this video, subscribe to my channel, and at any point in the video, share a comment below. So outcomes are actually the result of certain activities. And if you think about it, outcomes are really the thing we don't control. And when we get too focused on controlling outcomes, we can start to force and push. But instead, when we focus on activities, we can start to find grace and ease and joy in the activities themselves. So for example, in the world of sales, when we're focused on the outcomes, making a sale, that can sometimes lead us to become pushy and manipulative when we're on the phone with somebody because we're trying to get a yes. But instead, when we focus on activities, making calls, connecting with people, creating rapport with people, generating new opportunities, making new partnerships. When we focus on those activities and do them well and consistently, generally we're just going to have naturally more opportunities to make sales. And then we can detach from the outcomes and really cultivate the energy of service and trust. Here's the thing, when we think about the fact that energy precedes outcomes, when we're focused on outcomes, a lot of times what happens is we focus on what we don't have. So for example, that client from the very beginning, that first story, he wanted to get 100 people into his event. But if he was focused on outcomes, that means every step along the way, he was focusing on not having 100 people. When he was at 10 people, he was focused on the 90 people that he didn't yet have. When he was at 50 people, he was focused on the 50 people he didn't yet have. Focusing on the outcome while we're in the journey forces us to focus on scarcity. We're focusing on that which we don't have instead of our progress. In contrast, when we're instead focused on activities, we can be getting wins in every single column, every single day, or every single week. Instead of focusing on the 100 people that he wants and doesn't have, he could focus on the 10 calls he committed to and completed every single day. So focusing on the activities versus outcomes also shifts our focus and shifts our energy towards that which we can accomplish, that which we can control, our own activities, our own show up, rather than the result generated by it. So what we want to do, if you're doing this for yourself, is think about an outcome that you want to generate, whether that's filling an event or selling programs, and reframe the outcome based on what are the activities that would help you generate that outcome. So instead of focusing on getting the outcome, focus on all the strategies that can lead to the outcome. Making more sales calls, improving your conversion rate on those calls, raising your prices to be able to generate more revenues. There are a whole lot of different activities that could lead to more sales and more revenues in your business. What are those activities? Define them and then capture them in some structure. I like to use a plain old Google Sheets document. I list all the activities that I'm committed to. I list the goals next to the activities, and then every single week, I track those activities with my mentor. So I have somebody that holds me accountable to how many calls I'm making, how many sales conversations I'm having, how many blog posts I'm putting up, how many social posts I'm doing, how many YouTube videos I create. So I'm checking in on these on a regular basis to make sure I'm doing the activities. And then that way, I just focus all my energy on doing those activities the very best I can, and then kind of releasing the outcome. So you can do the same thing. What are those outcomes that you want? What are the activities that'll help you get there? And what are the goals for each of those activities? And then you've got to think about who's going to help you stay accountable. Now, here's one incredibly important bonus tip as you implement this strategy. And I got this tip from one of my mentors, Mark LeBlanc. So Mark LeBlanc teaches about a strategy called Storm Starter strategy. And by the way, if you want to look into what that means and what that's all about, check out my podcast. You can find it. I'm going to link to it below. But it's my podcast where I interview Mark LeBlanc about how he drives new leads and new sales into his business. So when Mark does storm starters, this is a way of just generating by having outreach and doing calls to old clients and new people and all that. He says you set the goal, you set the activity goal. I'm going to do 5 storm starters a day. That means I'm going to reach out to 5 people every single day to check in, say, hey, how are you? Are you interested in connecting again about my programs or my services? What he says is that if you get into a situation where you don't do the 5 calls that day, do not, whatever you do not roll those calls over into the next day, because you're just going to create a big old problem for yourself. He says no plus or minus carryover, no rollover, meaning if you do the calls, great, you did it. If you don't do the calls, great, you didn't do it. Move on to the next day. Every day is a brand new day. Start fresh, start over. This is important so that you don't get yourself into, beat up self-flagellation mode if you don't meet your goal, if you don't do the activity. You want to give yourself grace and give yourself the opportunity each day to start fresh, right? We're not perfect, and that's okay, but you don't want to get into a situation where 5 days in, you've got to do 30 phone calls or 25 or whatever it is. So I hope that this was helpful for you. I know it's a little bit counterintuitive, but I hope that you will now focus more on your activities than your outcomes so you can have more joy, more grace, more ease, and more growth in your business. So you can book some time with me if you want to learn more about what it would look like to work with me as a mentor, someone to hold you accountable. You can check that out at superstaractivator.com/go, or just click on the link below.